When a soul calls upon Saint Michael with full trust, the weight that once pressed upon the heart begins to loosen. The shadows that once confused the mind lose their strength, and a new clarity rises from within, leading the person back toward God's peace. Nothing stands immovable before the grace that the Archangel carries. No fear is too deep, no confusion too strong, no path too hidden for the light entrusted to him by the Lord. The moment you seek his guidance with sincerity, the invisible battle around you shifts, and heaven's order begins to unfold in every place where disorder once tried to prevail. Even when you feel lost, your cry is heard, and the response of God through his Archangel is never delayed. Saint Michael walks toward the soul that calls for help, not with noise or force, but with quiet authority that restores calm, direction, and spiritual confidence. His mission is to protect, to guide, and to strengthen every heart that desires to return to the will of God. When you allow his presence to accompany your steps, the uncertainties that once overwhelmed you begin to settle, not because the circumstances instantly change, but because the grace of God reframes how you perceive them. Confusion turns into understanding. Doubt turns into trust. Fear turns into the courage to walk again. This promise does not come from emotional wishfulness, but from the very reality of God's action in the lives of those who seek him. Through Saint Michael, heaven extends protection and clarity to the soul, lifting it from heaviness and leading it into renewed peace. The prayer that calls Saint Michael into your path. Holy Saint Michael, Prince of the heavenly host, I come before you with a heart that seeks direction and a spirit in need of strength. I ask that you stand beside me in this moment, when clarity feels distant and my steps seem uncertain. Guide me with the light entrusted to you by God, the same light that once cast down the darkness of rebellion and still shines against every confusion that rises to trouble the soul. Surround my path with the protection of your heavenly guard, so that no fear may cloud my discernment and no shadow may distort the truth that God desires to reveal. Strengthen my thoughts, guard my intentions, and steady my decisions. Remove from my mind every false path and every deceptive voice that attempts to draw me away from the peace that belongs to those who trust in the Lord. As you once defended the heavenly realm with fidelity and courage, defend now my heart from all that weakens its trust and dims its hope. Intercede for me before God, so that I may receive the grace to walk with renewed confidence, even when the way ahead is hidden from my eyes. Lift from me the weight that discourages, calm the anxieties that disturb my rest, and restore my inner balance so that I may hear more clearly the inspirations that come from heaven. Lead me back to the purpose God has written for my life, and let every step I take be aligned with his will and guided by your protection. Guard my home, my decisions, my relationships, and everything entrusted to my care. Help me act with wisdom, choose with discernment, and move with peace. When fear attempts to rise, remind me that the Lord is my refuge. When confusion tries to cloud my heart, remind me that God's truth cannot be hidden. When discouragement whispers that I am alone, remind me that heaven walks with me, and you, Saint Michael, go before me. Sustain my perseverance, strengthen my faith, and remain close to me with your unwavering guardianship. I entrust my steps, my concerns, and my future to your guidance, confident that you lead those who seek the Lord with humility and trust. May your intercession draw me deeper into God's peace, and may your presence keep my spirit steady until clarity and strength are restored within me. Amen. When peace feels far away, heaven draws closer. There are moments in every spiritual journey when peace seems distant, almost unreachable, as if the heart were walking through a landscape without clear landmarks. In such moments, a person often feels suspended between what they once trusted and what they can no longer see. Yet it is precisely in this experience of interior disorientation that the action of heaven becomes most present. When the soul cries for clarity, God sends Saint Michael to stand at its side with the authority given to him since the beginning. This authority is not merely symbolic. It expresses the very mission God entrusted to him: to defend, to illuminate, and to restore order in the midst of confusion. The scriptures reveal this role with profound clarity when the archangel stands against the forces of disorder in the visions of the prophet, reminding humanity that God never abandons those who seek his light. Even when peace seems absent, it is not lost. It waits to be awakened by grace. Saint Michael draws near to the soul that feels overwhelmed, not by removing every burden instantly, but by strengthening the interior ground on which the soul stands. When the heart begins to fear its own uncertainties, the archangel brings a quiet firmness that anchors the person in God's truth. This firmness does not erase the challenges of life, but it prevents those challenges from defining the person's identity or decisions. The more the soul turns toward heaven, the more it perceives subtle movements of protection that were unnoticed before. A thought becomes clearer, a worry grows smaller, a decision that felt impossible gains new grounding. These are not random emotional shifts. They are part of the hidden action of grace working through the intercession of Saint Michael. Peace often feels far away because the soul is listening to the noise of interior battles. Fear magnifies difficulties. Anxiety narrows perspective. Discouragement clouds the memory of God's fidelity. Saint Michael's intervention begins by quieting these interior storms so that the person may once again hear the truth rising within. This truth reminds the soul that God's presence is not determined by emotions, but by his promise. When the archangel draws near, he does not impose peace. He reveals the conditions that allow peace to take root. He guides the soul back toward trust, back toward prayer, back toward the certainty that God's light is stronger than any shadow that touches the mind. In those moments when peace feels far away, the soul is invited not to withdraw, but to call out with greater sincerity. The act of calling upon Saint Michael becomes itself an act of spiritual courage, a declaration that confusion will not have the final word. Heaven honors this movement of trust. Grace flows more freely. The path ahead becomes less threatening. The heart begins to recover the sense that God is actively guiding each step, even when the full direction is not yet revealed. When Saint Michael draws close, the soul discovers that peace is not a distant destination, but a reality waiting to be restored from within by the gentle yet decisive action of God, the invisible guidance that redirects the lost heart. There are moments when a person believes they have completely lost their way, when every choice feels uncertain and every thought seems to move in circles without leading anywhere. Yet in the spiritual life, feeling lost is not the end of the path. It is often the first sign that a deeper guidance is already unfolding. God permits the soul to experience the limits of its own clarity so that it may learn to rely not on instinct alone, but on divine direction. This is the moment when the mission of Saint Michael becomes most visible in its invisible form. The archangel does not guide by overwhelming the senses or forcing dramatic interventions. His guidance is subtle, steady, and exact, moving gently through the inner landscape of the soul to redirect its attention toward what leads back to God. Saint Michael's guidance begins by strengthening the interior faculties that confusion weakens. When the mind becomes tangled in worry, he brings a quiet firmness that helps thought regain order. When the heart feels overwhelmed by competing emotions, he restores a sense of proportion that allows the soul to distinguish what is true from what is exaggerated by fear. This transformation is often unnoticed at first because it happens within the intimate depths of the person. Yet its fruits gradually reveal themselves. A situation that once felt impossible suddenly appears manageable. An emotion that seemed unmovable begins to soften. A decision that felt frightening begins to feel grounded. These interior movements are signs that the Archangel is already at work. His guidance also redirects the heart away from paths that lead to spiritual exhaustion. Confusion often tempts the person to follow whatever emotion is strongest in the moment, even if that emotion leads toward isolation, discouragement, or panic. Saint Michael intervenes by elevating the soul's attention toward the truths that do not change: God's fidelity, God's protection, and the dignity of the person created in His image. When the soul begins to recall these truths, not as distant teachings but as living realities, it becomes less vulnerable to the impulses that disorder brings. The Archangel awakens this awareness by inspiring movements of reflection that remind the person who they are in God's eyes and where their strength truly comes from. The scriptures show time and again that God guides His people not only by clear signs, but also by interior movements that lead them step by step. In the passage of Matthew chapter 27, verse 50 to 51, the earth trembles at the moment Christ gives His Spirit to the Father, revealing that the visible and invisible worlds are inseparably connected. The same truth applies to the spiritual guidance of Saint Michael. What happens within the soul often echoes realities taking place in the unseen realm, where the Archangel fights to defend the person from influences that are not immediately perceptible. The sensation of confusion may rise within, but its intensity can diminish without warning when Saint Michael intervenes. This decrease in spiritual pressure is one of the clearest signs of His presence, even though it cannot be measured by the senses. Saint Michael also guides by opening interior paths that the person could not previously perceive. These paths often appear first as intuitions, quiet, grounded impressions that clarify what must be avoided or pursued. They do not arise from impulse, but from a growing sense of alignment with God's will. A person may suddenly recognize that a particular action would lead them away from peace, or that another option carries a sense of calm that feels distinctly spiritual. These are not emotional fluctuations. They are the fruits of discernment strengthened by the Archangel's presence. When the soul responds to these movements with trust, the path begins to unfold more clearly, one step at a time. The lost heart is also redirected through a gradual restoration of spiritual sight. Confusion blurs the ability to perceive God's nearness, making the person feel isolated. Saint Michael counters this illusion by leading the soul back into awareness of God's constant presence. This awareness does not eliminate all uncertainty, but it reshapes how the person carries their uncertainty. Instead of feeling crushed by what they cannot see, they begin to sense that they are being carried through it. The difference is profound. The heart shifts from anxiety to trust, not because all questions have been answered, but because a deeper assurance begins to take root within the soul. One of the most powerful aspects of Saint Michael's guidance is that he teaches the soul to walk again, not in haste, not in fear, but in confidence that each step taken with openness to God will bear fruit. He does not promise that every path will be free of difficulty. Instead, he ensures that no difficulty will have the power to separate the person from God's guidance. Under his protection, the lost heart becomes a heart in transition, moving steadily toward clarity even while the destination remains unseen. What once seemed an impossible maze becomes a path illuminated from within by grace. Saint Michael's invisible guidance is a reminder that God accompanies his children even when their journey feels uncertain. The lost heart is never abandoned. It is being prepared, strengthened, and redirected toward the peace that comes from trusting the one who leads through his holy archangel. Peace as a spiritual shield against confusion. Peace in the Christian life is not a passive feeling nor a fleeting emotional state. It is a spiritual force rooted in trust, sustained by grace, and defended by the presence of heaven. When confusion rises within the soul, peace does not simply disappear. It becomes obscured by interior noise, fears, and spiritual pressures that distort perception. Yet peace remains the inheritance of every person who seeks the Lord. One of the most profound missions of Saint Michael Archangel is to restore this peace and teach the soul how to guard it as a shield against the forces that attempt to disorient it. His presence does not merely calm the emotions, it strengthens the entire spiritual structure of the person, so that confusion loses its power to dominate the heart. Confusion attacks the soul by introducing fragmentation. Thoughts scatter, emotions intensify without clarity, and the person begins to doubt what they once trusted. Peace, however, brings unity. It integrates memory, reason, and discernment under the guidance of God. Saint Michael restores this unity by silencing the voices that do not come from the Holy Spirit, and by reinforcing the truths that anchor the soul in the certainty of divine guidance. When he draws near, the interior landscape begins to shift. What felt overwhelming becomes less threatening. What felt chaotic begins to settle. This transformation is not psychological alone. It is spiritual, born from the authority God entrusted to the Archangel. The enemy's strategy is often subtle, seeking first to destabilize the inner peace of the person, because a heart lacking peace becomes more vulnerable to discouragement and distorted perceptions. Saint Michael intervenes precisely at this point. He strengthens the soul to resist these disturbances by redirecting its attention to the constancy of God's love. This act of redirection is essential. Confusion thrives when the soul gazes inward without reference to God's presence. Peace returns when the gaze is elevated once more toward the one who sustains all things. Under Saint Michael's protection, the soul begins to remember truths it had forgotten, that God is faithful, that His guidance is trustworthy, and that His will does not contradict the peace He desires for His children. The Scriptures affirm that God is a God of order, not of confusion. When disorder arises in the heart, it is not a sign of God's absence, but a call to draw more deeply into His presence. Saint Michael facilitates this movement by restoring the spiritual order the person cannot restore alone. He brings strength to resist intrusive fears and clarity to discern between authentic spiritual concern and unnecessary anxiety. Many individuals mistakenly assume that confusion indicates they have strayed from God. In reality, confusion often arises precisely when grace is preparing to illuminate a new direction. The task of Saint Michael is to ensure that this illumination is not obstructed by fear, but welcomed with renewed trust. Peace also functions as a shield by protecting the heart from hasty conclusions. When the mind is unsettled, it becomes tempted to adopt quick, fearful interpretations of events. Saint Michael tempers this impulse by grounding the soul in patience. He teaches the heart to wait, to breathe, and to allow grace to reveal solutions that cannot be seen in the heat of anxiety. This patient endurance is not passive resignation. It is a spiritual stance that acknowledges the sovereignty of God over every circumstance. Under the Archangel's guidance, the soul learns to act not from fear-driven urgency, but from God-centered discernment. Another aspect of peace as a shield is its ability to guard identity. Confusion often makes a person question their purpose, their worth, and their place before God. When these doubts arise, Saint Michael reminds the soul of its true identity, a beloved child of God, strengthened by grace, defended by heaven, and called to walk in the dignity provided by the Creator. This restoration of identity automatically weakens the influence of confusion. A soul that knows who it is cannot be easily manipulated by uncertainty. It stands firmly, even when circumstances are unclear. Saint Michael also helps the soul recognize the difference between authentic spiritual struggle and unnecessary interior agitation. Authentic struggle deepens trust and leads to growth. Agitation drains strength and clouds discernment. When the Archangel intervenes, he brings a clarity that distinguishes between the two. He dispels agitation by reintroducing peace, and he strengthens authentic struggle by anchoring the person in God's presence. This distinction is essential for the spiritual life, as it prevents the soul from misinterpreting God's invitations as obstacles or interpreting passing fears as definitive signs. Peace, when restored and guarded, becomes a spiritual shield because it brings the soul into alignment with God's rhythm. Confusion pushes the soul into haste or paralysis. Peace teaches the soul to walk with steady steps, aware that God does not abandon those who sincerely seek his guidance. With Saint Michael's help, peace becomes not only a refuge but a weapon, one that protects the heart from falsehood, strengthens the mind against distortion, and equips the spirit to persevere with clarity and trust. In this way, Saint Michael does not merely comfort the soul, he fortifies it. He ensures that peace becomes a stable foundation rather than a fragile moment, a shield rather than a fleeting relief. Under his guidance, confusion loses its authority, and the soul begins to perceive that true peace is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of God shaping each step with purpose. The power of choosing the light. When everything feels dark. There are moments in life when darkness does not appear as an external threat, but as an interior weight, pressing upon the mind and narrowing the heart until even simple steps feel heavy. In these moments, many people believe that choosing the light requires a sudden burst of strength, but in reality, choosing the light is often a quiet act, a small movement of the will that opens the soul to the intervention of heaven. Saint Michael Archangel acts precisely through this opening. When the heart, even in exhaustion, makes the smallest decision to turn toward God, the Archangel responds with a strength that far exceeds what the person feels capable of offering. Choosing the light is not about overcoming everything at once. It is about allowing grace to enter where darkness once claimed territory. Darkness works by magnifying fear and reducing perspective. It convinces the soul that it is alone, unsupported, and unable to discern the way forward. Saint Michael counters this strategy by revealing, through subtle but steady interior movements, that God has never withdrawn his presence. The moment a person chooses the light, through prayer, through trust, through the deliberate act of lifting their thoughts toward heaven, the balance of the spiritual battle shifts. What was heavy begins to lighten. What was confusing begins to clarify. This is not the result of emotional optimism, but the work of divine grace flowing through the Archangel's mission of protection. Choosing the light is often misunderstood. Many assume it means feeling strong, confident, or spiritually uplifted. But in the tradition of the Church, choosing the light means something deeper. It means standing before God in truth, offering him the reality of your condition without hiding. Saint Michael assists the soul in this act by dispelling the false belief that darkness must first disappear before a person can approach the Lord. He teaches the heart that God welcomes the soul exactly as it is, and that the smallest decision toward the good becomes a doorway for grace. This understanding frees the person from spiritual perfectionism and opens the path to authentic transformation. Scripture reveals that encounters with divine messengers often take place in moments of fear or uncertainty. When the angel appears to the shepherds, the message begins with reassurance, not celebration. When the angel of the Lord strengthens Elijah in the desert, it is not after victory, but at the lowest point of despair. These narratives show a consistent pattern. Heaven draws near not when the person feels strong, but when the person feels incapable of walking further. This pattern mirrors the action of Saint Michael. When the soul feels surrounded by darkness, the Archangel does not wait for the soul to rise on its own. He comes to defend it, so that it may rise again through grace. The decision to choose the light also weakens the influence of interior distortions. Darkness manipulates perception, making challenges appear larger and hope appear smaller. Saint Michael intervenes by adjusting the interior lens through which the soul sees its circumstances. A burden that seemed unbearable becomes something that can be carried step by step. A problem that appeared unsolvable becomes an opportunity for God's providence to unfold. These shifts are not illusions, they are corrections brought by grace. The soul begins to perceive reality with greater truth, freed from the exaggerations that fear often imposes. Another aspect of choosing the light is the restoration of the will. Darkness attempts to paralyze the person, convincing them that no effort will bring change. Saint Michael strengthens the will by anchoring it in divine purpose. He reminds the soul that even the smallest act, speaking a prayer, resisting a negative thought, making a responsible decision, carries spiritual weight. Every small choice toward the good accumulates, slowly but surely, establishing a new interior direction. In this sense, darkness is not defeated by dramatic gestures, but by consistent acts of trust, made possible through the Archangel's support. When everything feels dark, prayer becomes an act of resistance, not resistance against the mind or emotions, but against the forces that attempt to lead the soul away from God's peace. Saint Michael stands with the person in this prayer, ensuring that the soul is not overwhelmed by the pressures surrounding it. The Archangel does not replace the person's effort, he amplifies it, strengthens it, and protects it. This collaboration between divine grace and human freedom is at the heart of spiritual growth. It demonstrates that the soul is never passive in its own journey, nor is it left to face darkness alone. Choosing the light also restores meaning. Darkness often convinces the soul that its struggles are pointless, that its efforts will not bear fruit, that its path is aimless. Saint Michael dispels this lie by guiding the heart back to the truth that every moment of life, whether peaceful or painful, holds purpose within God's plan. The Archangel does not create meaning, he reveals the meaning God already placed in the person's existence. This revelation does not remove every difficulty, but it reorients the soul so that the difficulty no longer defines the person's identity or destiny. In the end, the power of choosing the light lies in its simplicity. It is a decision accessible to every soul, no matter how heavy the darkness feels. Through this decision, Saint Michael acts with renewed strength, guiding the person not by removing every struggle, but by ensuring that no struggle becomes a barrier to God's presence. In this way, the soul learns that darkness does not have the final word. The final word belongs to grace, and through the help of Saint Michael Archangel, that grace leads the person back to peace, clarity, and trust. Walking with Saint Michael restores identity and purpose. There are seasons in a person's life when the deepest struggle is not with external circumstances, but with the quiet erosion of identity. The soul begins to forget who it is before God. Responsibilities feel heavy, discouragement settles in the mind, and the sense of mission that once brought clarity becomes clouded. In such moments, individuals often interpret their confusion as weakness or failure. Yet the spiritual tradition of the Church teaches that identity is not preserved by human strength. It is preserved by grace, and one of the most profound missions of Saint Michael Archangel is to defend the identity of God's children so that they may rediscover the purpose written for them since the beginning. When the soul walks with Saint Michael, it does not merely regain direction, it recovers itself. Identity becomes fragile whenever fear gains authority in the heart. Fear distorts how the person perceives God, others, and themselves. It reduces dignity to inadequacy and confuses vocation with burden. Saint Michael counters this distortion with the authority entrusted to him by the Lord. His presence restores the truth about who the person is, created intentionally, loved fully, and called to reflect the light of God. This restoration is not abstract. It occurs gradually as the Archangel strengthens the interior faculties that fear weakens. The mind becomes clearer, the heart becomes steadier, and the person begins to recognize that their worth does not come from success or failure, but from the unchanging love of God. When identity is weakened, purpose becomes obscure. Purpose is not merely a task or role, it is the expression of the soul's relationship with God. Confusion often arises when the person tries to live out their purpose from a place of exhaustion rather than from a place of grace. Saint Michael intervenes by lifting the spiritual pressures that suffocate clarity. He creates interior space where the person can breathe again, reflect again, and listen again. In this space, the inspirations of the Holy Spirit become more audible. The individual begins to understand not only what they must do, but why they must do it. This rediscovery of purpose does not come as a sudden revelation, but as a renewed alignment of the heart with the will of God. Scripture shows that God frequently reaffirms identity before revealing mission. When the angel Gabriel appears to Mary, he begins by naming her identity as full of grace. When Gideon doubts his strength, the angel of the Lord addresses him as a mighty warrior before giving him a task. This pattern appears again and again. God strengthens the foundation of identity so that purpose can be lived with freedom. Saint Michael participates in this divine pattern. He fortifies the soul so that the person may stand in the full truth of who they are before receiving clarity about where God is leading them. Without this restoration, purpose becomes distorted by fear or ambition. With it, purpose becomes an authentic expression of grace. Another aspect of walking with Saint Michael is the renewal of spiritual confidence. Confusion weakens confidence by making the soul feel unworthy or incapable. The Archangel counters this by dispelling the false beliefs that often go unchecked when the person is overwhelmed. These beliefs may whisper that God is disappointed, that the soul is alone, or that mistakes have separated the person from divine favor. Saint Michael refutes these lies by strengthening the memory of God's fidelity. The soul begins to recall moments when grace provided in unexpected ways, when prayers were answered, when protection was unmistakable. These memories are not sentimental. They are spiritual evidence that God remains present and active. Once confidence is restored, the person can walk forward with renewed stability. Identity also depends on the ability to resist influences that attempt to reshape the heart according to fear. The enemy often attacks identity by presenting distorted narratives about who the person is and what they are capable of. Saint Michael's protection shields the soul from these narratives by refocusing attention on the truth that flows from God. He strengthens the person's resolve to reject any thought that contradicts their dignity as a child of the Creator. When these thoughts lose their authority, the soul becomes more capable of perceiving God's invitations with clarity. Purpose emerges from this clarity, not as an external command, but as an inner resonance with God's will. Another way Saint Michael restores identity is by helping the soul reclaim the spiritual authority granted through baptism. Every Christian is consecrated to God and called to participate in the mission of Christ. When confusion overshadows the heart, this spiritual authority becomes forgotten. Saint Michael reminds the person that they are not powerless but strengthened by grace. This reminder is not meant to inspire pride, but to awaken responsibility. Their soul that knows its authority walks differently. It speaks with greater truth, acts with greater integrity, and resists spiritual pressures with greater perseverance. This transformation allows purpose to unfold naturally, without the strain of self-reliance. Walking with Saint Michael also helps the soul distinguish between false purposes and authentic ones. False purposes arise from fear, comparison, or the desire to prove something. Authentic purpose arises from love. When the Archangel illuminates the heart, the motivations of the person become purified. they begin to recognize which paths drain their spirit and which paths expand their capacity to love and serve. This discernment is crucial. Without it, the person may pursue goals that lead them away from peace. With it, they begin to recognize the mission God has prepared specifically for them, a mission that aligns with their gifts, their wounds, and their deepest desires. As identity is restored, courage emerges. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. Saint Michael strengthens courage by standing with the soul in every moment of uncertainty. His presence reminds the person that they are not navigating their life alone. This awareness transforms the way the soul approaches challenges. Obstacles that once felt insurmountable now appear as points where grace will intervene. Decisions that once felt overwhelming now appear as opportunities to trust more deeply in God's guidance. Purpose becomes not a burden, but a path toward communion with the Lord. In the end, walking with Saint Michael restores identity because it brings the soul back into alignment with the truth that God never abandons his children. The Archangel does not impose identity, he reveals it. He does not fabricate purpose, he uncovers what God placed in the person from the beginning. Through his protection and guidance, the soul learns that confusion does not erase identity, and difficulty does not negate purpose. Under his care, the heart becomes strong again, the mind becomes clear again, and the entire person becomes capable of living the mission entrusted by God with renewed confidence and peace. The return to peace, a new way forward with God. When the journey has felt long and confusion has weighed heavily upon the heart, the return to peace is not merely a relief, it is a transformation. It is the moment when the soul recognizes that God has been guiding every step, even those taken in uncertainty. Peace does not simply descend as an emotion, it emerges as a deeper awareness, a connection to the truth that the Lord has never withdrawn his presence even when the path felt hidden. Under the guidance of Saint Michael Archangel, this return to peace becomes the beginning of a new way of walking, one shaped not by fear, but by trust, not by haste, but by grace, not by isolation, but by communion with heaven. The return to peace begins with a reorientation of the heart. Confusion narrows the soul's vision, making it difficult to recognize God's movements. Peace widens this vision. It restores perspective, allowing the person to see that what once appeared as obstacles were often places where grace was preparing the heart for deeper growth. Saint Michael helps the soul reinterpret its journey without condemnation. He lifts the weight of self-blame, correcting the mistaken belief that moments of disorientation were failures. Instead, he reveals them as thresholds, places where the soul was invited to trust more deeply. This reorientation is essential because peace cannot be sustained when the soul remains trapped in misinterpretations of its past. As peace returns, the person begins to recognize the subtle ways God accompanies them. A thought becomes clearer. A decision that once felt overwhelming begins to feel manageable. A burden that once pressed on the heart begins to lighten. These movements are not coincidences. They are signs that the soul has become receptive again to divine guidance. Saint Michael's presence strengthens this receptivity, ensuring that the person does not revert to old patterns of fear or self-reliance. Instead, they begin to walk with a newfound sensitivity to grace. Each moment becomes an opportunity to respond to God with greater openness. The return to peace also reveals the false foundations that once shaped the person's reactions. Fear had taught the soul to see threats everywhere. Confusion had taught it to distrust its own ability to discern. Under Saint Michael's guidance, these false foundations crumble. In their place rises a foundation rooted in truth, that God is faithful, that his will is steady, and that his love remains constant in every season. When this truth becomes the center of the soul's awareness, the person walks differently. Decisions are not driven by panic, but by discernment. Challenges are not met with dread, but with courage. The future is not a source of anxiety, but a space where God's providence will continue to unfold. One of the most profound aspects of this restored peace is the renewal of spiritual rhythm. Confusion often creates an interior restlessness that makes it difficult to listen, pray, or reflect. Peace brings rhythm back to the soul. It slows the heart to match the movement of grace. Saint Michael assists this renewal by guarding the soul from distractions that once scattered its attention. He teaches the person to remain centered, to breathe spiritually, and to walk without rushing ahead of God. In this rhythm, prayer deepens, clarity increases, and the soul becomes more capable of recognizing God's inspirations as they arise. This new way of walking with God also involves a rediscovery of freedom. When confusion dominated, the soul felt restricted, unable to see beyond the immediate pressure of its concerns. Peace restores freedom by widening the interior horizon. Under Saint Michael's guidance, this freedom becomes anchored in responsibility, not as a burden, but as the joyful awareness that each choice made in grace becomes part of the person's journey toward holiness. The soul realizes that it is not trapped by past mistakes nor defined by previous fears. Instead, it is shaped by the grace that continually renews it. Another dimension of the return to peace is the courage to take the next step. Peace does not eliminate uncertainty about the future. Instead, it strengthens the soul to move forward, even when not everything is clear. Saint Michael accompanies the person in this step, ensuring that the heart does not fall back into hesitation or paralysis. His presence provides a spiritual assurance that God is already in the place toward which the soul is moving. This assurance frees the person from the need to control outcomes. They begin to trust that the journey will unfold according to God's timing, not their anxieties. As peace deepens, gratitude begins to rise naturally within the soul. Gratitude is not a forced practice, but a response to the awareness of God's fidelity. The person begins to see how grace carried them when they felt lost, how Saint Michael protected them when they felt vulnerable, and how the Holy Spirit whispered truth even when confusion clouded their perception. Gratitude becomes the fuel for renewed hope, allowing the soul to look forward with a sense of expectation rather than dread. Hope no longer feels fragile, it feels grounded. The return to peace ultimately leads the soul to a new relationship with God, more trusting, more receptive, more willing to surrender. This surrender is not a passive resignation, but an active choice to walk in harmony with divine will. Saint Michael supports this surrender by ensuring that fear no longer dominates the person's decisions. He guards the soul's interior freedom, allowing it to respond to God with authenticity. In this surrender, the person discovers that peace is not a destination, but a way of being, a way of walking through life rooted in confidence that God directs every step. By the end of this journey, the soul emerges not simply relieved, but strengthened. It no longer walks as someone who has been rescued temporarily, but as someone who has been transformed. Confusion did not have the final word. Grace did. And with Saint Michael Archangel guiding each step, the path ahead is not defined by uncertainty, but by the quiet assurance that God will continue to lead, protect, and accompany the soul into every new beginning. This is the new way forward, a way shaped by peace, held by grace, and illuminated by the light of heaven.